I'm Danny Davis. I am really a pure Smith both sides because my mum's called Jean Smith. Her father was called Pepper Smith. My dad's side, my dad's father was called Wisdom Smith. My granny, she was Rosie Smith. They come out of the Forest of Dean into wagons. And my granddad come out of the wagons. He was a London Cockney traveller. And they shifted down to a place called Evesham for the work where they all used to get together, you know, to do all the field work and the things like. And my mother, she was born upon the Mendips in a wagon, and my Aunt Shirley was born in the wagon on the Mendips. And years ago, when they were shifting in the wagons and they pulled over, see, there was not so much like the NHS like today. You had to run and find a village doctor. So my granddad pulled upon the green, upon the Mendips there, outside of like a pub, I suppose, in a bit of a green, put the wagons down, like. And he sent for a little boy, said, "Is there a village doctor here?" And he said to this little boy, "Yes," he said, "I knows where the village doctor is." He said, "Well, run and get him." He said, "Me wife's having a baby," he said, "in the wagon." So the little boy run and found the village doctor. So in the meanwhile, back years ago, you'd have a policeman, he'd come on a bike. So the policeman said, "Oh, he said, "you can't pitch," he said, "that wagon and horses and things on that green," he said. "You hitch it up," he said, "and get on." My granddad said, "I can't," he said. "Me wife's in the wagon," he said, "in labour," he said. "I've sent," he said, "for a village doctor." He went, "Bloody hell," he said, "I hope she has bloody twins." So listen, about 3 years ago, me mum, she said, "I'll go back up," she said, "and round the village," she said, "where I was born," she said, "on the green," she said, "I was born up down there." So anyway, listen to this. Me mum goes up, this is only about 3-4 years ago, goes up on the place where she's born, the little village pub. She thought she'd go in the pub and have a drink. So when she sat in the pub like that there was some old people sat back aside, said, "Oh, are you here on holiday or are you visiting and things?" Because my mum's always dressed up tidy. "No," she said, "I thought I'd come back," she said, "because I was born on that green." She said, "I was born in a wagon." This old man leaned forward, he said, "Listen," he said, "your father," he said, "wouldn't call Dan, he said, was he? He said, and he called his uncle, he said, and they was the same age." "Yes," she said, "how did you know that?" He said, "because I was the little boy," he said, "they sent for the doctor." And me dad, he was born in Ulcester. He was born in a rod tent. He never had the luxury of a red wagon back then. He was born into a rod tent. And then when they did get a bit older, like, my granddad had bought himself a wagon, but it was a big family. Like, he ended up with like 10 children, 10 boys. Well, when they got older, with the 12 can't sleep in a wagon. So what they used to do, they used to sheet the bottom of the shafts up, all round the wheels like. So the boys used to climb under the wagon with the sheet down and make the bed under the wagon. Do you understand? So when my granddad was in the bedside, inside the wagon, when the boys was rowing or arguing underneath because underneath and up, my granddad had a big stick. He used to bang the wagon floor. "Bang, bang, go to sleep, you little bastards, I'll strike you to death." He'd bang the wagon floor. So anyhow, he'd come back one day, and they're picking potatoes up. See, back years ago when you used to pick the potatoes up in the fields, you had big old 1/2-hundredweight sacks, like old big sacks, cloth sacks, didn't you? Well, my granddad sewed the wagon. See? And he must have had a deal for like a rod tent. So now they got nowhere to sleep with them. So they said, "Dad, where's we going to sleep to?" He said, "Go and make yourself a bed," he said. What do you think they had to do? Get into the edges, cut like line props, make an old teepee, and wrap it in the tater sacks like an old Indian. And wrap the tater sacks in it from the beginning. They had to make the bed. Well, they shifted. I mean, say, some of them come at the Forest of Dean, and like I said, they shifted to Evesham, where they used to do all the bit of field work in the plums and all in the wagon and the horses. Then they used to shift from there to Prince Lane in Polton, where they was all in wagons and horses, all into Prince Lane. Then they used to run to Heathrow Airport. When Heathrow Airport, there was hardly any there, which was a little council site at Heathrow Airport. I've still got family on them to this day. So when I was a little boy, I can remember stopping at the bottom of the airport, and I used to be frightened. I remember the planes going over the top of the trailers. Whoosh! When I was a little boy, because they ain't going to crash into the trailers or something. I think that's why I'm a bit nervous. I haven't been on a plane since. I've never been on one. And they shifted from there all down to Exeter, Exeter and all the P Yard, Taunton, all the way around really. Everywhere where there was a bit of work where they'd get into a farm, they shift to it. Do you understand? And when they wouldn't doing that there, my poor granddad, I can remember my granny used to say to me, go to school to read and write, so I could read the signs, see? So they could find their way to the villages, and she used to get herself what you call an orchard's basket. So my granddad used to sit down with his peg knife, make the pegs, the wooden pegs, bunch them up into sixes and a dozens, you know, like half a dozen and a dozen, like. And my granny had her orchard's basket, and she used to put like a little bit of lace, shoelaces, brushes for the sink, all things like that there, tough brushes, and she used to put it in the basket and the pegs, and then she'd knock on the door down and say, hello my love, I'm round here the day, Gypsy, would you like the bag? And she used to pull the cloth off, and the people at the doors used to look down and say, well, I could do with a couple of sponges or a couple of brushes. And when the basket got empty, she used to go back to the motor, because she'd have like a big suitcase or something like that, and then refill it, but she'd place everything nice. Do you understand? Do field work seasons round. Like you could pick potatoes up, you could pick the peas, pick the beans, cut the Swedes, pick the black currants, go and pick the strawberries. You know, hop country, you've got to pick the hops in them, you know what I mean?
But does that work still exist?
Not really.
For the likes of you?
No, it's died at this last, say, 20 years. All my family, right back through, picked sprouts up on Camden. You name it, they've done it. But now, machines took the Swedes, so now they've got a machine that can take the Swedes. Now they prefer to hire the foreigners, like the Polish and the people like that, because what it was years ago, why travelling people, farmers had travellers to work the fields, because at the end of the day, the gorgy people in the houses weren't hard enough for it. All winds and weathers out there, the rain enough to drown you, the frost enough to cut your ears off, right? Gorgies were used to houses. They're not used to it, and they're not used to that. You let a gorgy man go outside, stand in that rain for 5 minutes, he's bibbering, he's shaking, he don't know what to do. Whereas we were outside anyhow, 24/7, so all travellers were hardened to the weather, weren't they? So they could work the fields, couldn't they?
Yeah.
Right, they could take their families in, all children made to work, so we suited it at the time, didn't we?
Yeah.
Whereas, see, I can remember working in the fields, and you see a few non-travellers come in, and you know what we used to say? They won't last to dinner time. Alright, one might last one day. You won't be, and they never last. We used to pull on the side of the road at Oxford, right? And me dad, look, why you like pulling to Oxford? Because Oxford was a good place to shout for the scrap, right? And it's a bike country. It's still a bike country today, isn't it? So when me dad used to collect all the old bikes up, look, me dad, if he had like, say, I don't know, 20 bikes, he'd make 3 or 4 good bikes out of one, look. Because he'd come back, put them all together. Mum was on the side of the old lay-by, look. My dad used to put them up for sale, and people used to stop and buy the old bikes off him. But it would have been many a bikes put together to make you take the saddle off of one, the handlebars off the other. So my dad, he said, to keep it look tidy, he said, because we're stopping on the side of the road, he said, with all the scraps in the old scrap cars. Remember the old big lorry sheets, the great big old. He covered all over with the lorry sheets, right, with the tar sheet, with the sheets like. And I used to play in amongst the scrap. Well, now and again, I can remember he'd bring back an old car, take the wheels off, but if he start, he let me get in for keep me quiet, rev him up all day. Do the petrols. He said I'd keep him quiet. So, because we was on the main road, look, stopping on the main road, well, summertime, see beautiful summer, you can't keep the children inside the trailer, but also you can't let them out to play, because all you had was a bit of grass verge on the main road, didn't you? So what they used to do, say the harnesses, what they put round you, look, they used to get like a piece of chain, like say 10 or 12 foot piece of chain it to the tow bar of the trailer, and chain it to me hip. Put a few toys and a bit of blanket down, so wherever my mum could clean the trailer up there and do a few things, she knows I won't go nowhere. I expect me to child chained up. So I was on the bit of grass, you know what I mean? And that's what all the traveller children use. You had to be chained to a tow bar. Because when you're little children like this, 12, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, main road, you'd be killed. And just for a few pen and a few wooden pegs, and I used to go with them, look. Because they used to say, what's the name of that village again? A woman said, come back. And I used to read the signs. So I'll write it down for them, you know, because they couldn't read or write, look, you know. And I used to go over them while they sewed the bit of, what we call back then, a bit of swag.
Yeah, so did you consider yourself lucky that you got that much education?
Well, of course I did.
Yeah.
Of course I did. And then, it's like me, look. Now, my brother, he got him over there. Now, he got the peg knives of my granddad's. Now them peg knives, what normal knives like you say where's a knife, my mother and father and my aunties got brought up on them. That kept them. That fed them. Those peg knives fed them. That's what he made the pegs of, and he sheath. Now those knives we still got, when you roll them back, now they're not to anybody else, they'd look at them and say, oh, it's just knives. Not to them, because them knives fed my mother, fed my auntie and brought them up, and my uncle. How he used to make a peg knife, he used to get back like that, because he could measure your hand. He used to make us little small ones, you know, miniature ones for children. He used to measure your hand like that. He'd say, right, let's get something. He'd get something like that. He'd say, bring your hand here. If that baby, and he'd measure your hand like that. He'd go, right, roughly bit there, and he'd mark it, so he'd like a bit of stick, and he'd break it off. And then what he'd do, when he was up and down in the old antique shops, or the old places, or old junk places, he'd look for an handle, a wooden handle. It could be on a trowel, it could be on an old saw, any type of old wooden. Remember the old wooden tools, carpenter tools?
Yeah.
He'd get the bit of stick out, and it looks about right, and there's his handle. And he'd bring him back, there'd be the handle, and he'd get the handle, and he'd shape him like to the palm, you know, like a peg knife, like a pear. And he'd sit with it, and he'd shape him, right? And then he'd put him back aside like that. I watch him do this all the time. To me, this is normal. Then he said, right, I need to find a blade. Then he'd do the same. When he was on a round, he wouldn't buy blades like pointed knives. They'd look for like a little bit of a curve on him, like a peg knife or something like that there. And then all of a sudden he'd be around, it could be any old knife, he'd look for the blade. Then when he'd find the blade, could be small, whatever would match the handle, he'd take him home, he'd saw him off, look, and he'd sharpen him. Well, he said, always find a bit of black blade. He said, always a best old blade. He said, it'll sharpen. So now he had a handle, he had the blade. And then what he'd do, he'd find an old chair, you know, like an old school chair or any old chair. It used to be old 4-micro chairs years ago with a bit of round pole. And he'd get the pole, he'd cut the pole off, like, or he'd have a piece in the shed already, like a pole. And he'd cut a piece about 1 inch long. And then what he'd do, look, with the handle, he'd push the handle in like there so the timber was the opposite side. And then the blade, because he already had a slit in the handle, then he pushed the blade in like that. So now you picture the round pipe as half over the blade, half over the handle. And then he'd turn it up, he'd get himself some big screws, like long screws, and on the hole on the outside, he'd screw the screws down, which would tighten the wood to the blade. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And then there was your little peg knife, and they chat round the old fire. Either for a bit of fun, they have a game of pitch with the coins.
Yeah.
You know what I'm on about, nearest to the line, and then have yourself a spin. I was always a bad one for running picking up the money. For my dad used to go full, but or they'd have a spin, or they'd have a spin for a duck or a spin for a dog. I had 2 dogs. One was a running dog, and one was half of an Alsatian. My dad come back. He said, "I've just lost one of the dogs." He said to one of the Lees. He said, "One of them got to go." He said, "Which one do you want to get rid of?" So he'd come back. So there I say, "Well, let that dog go. I keep Liz." That was the way it was. He said, "I'll try and win it back tomorrow night." Do you know what I mean?
Was my dad's side. A lot of them stayed in, you know, Wellington, Rockall Green. There's a site there called Rockall Green. And they was in wagons. No, not wagons, sorry, they couldn't afford a wagon. I'm not going to tell lies. They were in benders and tents. And they were down near Minehead and Plymouth. And they travelled up. And my great-granny, her husband, left her. She had 15 children. My great-granddad was a drunk. And when all the children got older, they beat him away. So they had no man help whatsoever. So it was really hard times. And that's when they were doing the rags, the scrap, anything that they could do. My family done it. They broke into places. I'm not joking. They did everything. Hot picking, any field work that there was, is what they done. My dear old granny, my granny, right, she had no husband at the age of 30 odd. So she was a widower. So she was at Kent when my granddad died. My granddad was from Kent. And she come down to Rockall Green site. And that's when my granny was, you know, with all the 15 children. And between them all, that's how they was doing all the scrap, whatever they could, the field work, whatever there was on hand to do it. And and I mean not joking, very hard times, right? My mum's side, they was in wagons. But my granny, my granny, right, was from Oakhampton. and she had enough. She had 11 children, and they couldn't starvation as well. So they bought like a little old wooden shack, like a cabin, like that. But remember, I'm going back 80 odd years ago, right? And she started off. She was down Oakhampton, and she bring up, I think, 5 of the children, and that was born down there. And then they come up to North Curry, and my granny had a farm before, where the war was on. My granddad had the choice: go to war, or you could, if you were a farmer, you didn't have to go to war, did you? So he decided to become a farmer with horses. He raised his horses, he sowed his brooms, and out in a few wagons, whatever they could do, right? And then that's when I told you that, my granny, she had the foreigner, what did I say, the prisoner of horse would come, and she'd out feed them, she'd out do them. But my granny, she was made a widow, young. My granddad died. So my granny, right, is known up and down the country. You ever say Faithy Penfold, and easy to call me a liar, the best hawking woman and dealing woman up and down the country. She dealt in anything you had. Every traveller in the country, when they had no money, they'd get in their trailers and their motors, full of their china, everything in it. They would come to my granny and swap and do, and my granny would have a deal for the lot.
Well, my dad married my mum, and he was outcasted. And we lived in a trailer, Hutton. I was born down Hutton 60 years ago. 60 years ago, yeah. And I was brought up there for a few years, and then my dad found a job, and he moved into a house. I've never not had a horse. I've had horses all my life. I was born with horses, and I was born with a horse, and I was born on a horse, more like. So my horse dealing goes back from my great granddad right down through to my dad and to me. We've dealt in horses ourselves. At one time we've had over 30 horses. My husband used to drive for Vernon White. He was a well-known horse dealer around here. My cousin's Robert Penfold. He used to do a lot of horse dealing. And that's how it all started, really. I went to school. I got bullied. I got bullied by other travellers for calling me all the names under the sun you can think of. Why, I don't know, because they were no different than me. Teachers used to bully me. I never had many friends, so I didn't go very often, and I just rode my horses.
My education started off, I was sent to school at, I suppose, 5 years old. I went all through sort of junior school, it was called then, infants, juniors. I then went on to the comprehensive school. I had to go all the way through, and Nan made sure of that. I left school. I did get a proper job for a very short while. I've had several proper jobs, I call them, in that time. Other times I've worked for myself. I've done anything from tree lopping, scrap, power washing driveways. What else have I done? Buy and sell a few horses. Don't do that very often. Dogs. I will buy and sell dogs. But mainly it's the scrap metal. But recent years, I work for my uncle as the warden of his site. He owns where we live. But I think things have got a lot harder with the work. A lot of that is down to the internet, and one of the big things is all the social media. The days of knocking on the door or anything like that to get work, I think are going to be gone very soon. We've all seen the no cold calling signs, and that's getting a lot bigger. On the whole, most are pretty good, but again, there's good and bad in all. I think I get away with it quite a lot because I'm well known outside of the traveller community as well. So having a lot of friends that aren't, and I find I can go into most places and I'm treated pretty good. But again, go to Appleby, I become one of those scum that stay up on the hill. Not through anything I do. Because I treat people how I'm treated. I insist that my kids are always polite, and that ranges. I got a 30-year-old lad. If he was rude to somebody, he'd get told off by me as well as what the little one would. But we all see the programmes about Appleby Horse Fair, where a lot of the locals don't like it. They class me as bad as anybody up there. You know what I mean?
You're tired with the same.
Oh yeah,
brush.
tired with the same
Yeah.
brush is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
As I said, I went through all through school. I didn't come out with very good grades or anything. I just hope my daughter does better because she's going to school all the way through, which is quite rare with the travellers even now. But I do think
so. You consider yourself the exception rather than the rule.
not the
education?
exception. It's just more my preference that I want my daughter to go to school. She's determined she's going to become a vet. Well, I've got 3 kids of my own. All three of those have gone all the way through school, and they've all, well, obviously not the youngest one, but the other 2, they've got proper jobs. Ranging from one works on the roads to the other works to do with IT.
So my name's Rachel Ballin, and I've been working in traveller education now for around about 15 years, for a fair old time. I started off because I worked in a Catholic school, and we had quite a few Irish travellers. A lot of Irish travellers are Catholic, and I took a particular interest in the children and got to know quite a few of their families. And there was somebody like me who came in from a traveller education service, and she said to me that she thought I would do well at this job if it came up, and I thought it sounded really interesting. Started finding out more about the cultures, and when a job did come up, I went for it, and I've been doing that ever since. It's been a real privilege working with the traveller community. I think not many people have the chance to get to know families, to go and visit sites and work with the children. It's been fascinating, really interesting, and I've seen a lot of change in terms of attitude to education and also access to different kinds of education in that time. Working with travellers in education, I always think, and I try and inspire people in schools to think, that the work we're doing is generational work. We are often working with the first generation of children who are going to go all the way through from probably preschool up until perhaps into secondary, or even if they are home educated for a while, coming back to college and doing practical skills. So if they have that experience, they enjoy it and they love school, they're much more likely to encourage their kids to do the same. So every success we can have with the traveller child in the current climate, we're paving the way for the future, hopefully, for families to embrace more education as time goes on. A quote from one grandfather who said quite genuinely, I would have encouraged him to go to secondary school, but it would have got in the way of his education. Because for him, education was about learning skills, learning practical trades alongside the family to prepare you for life that way. Having said that, we have got children who do go to secondary school, do very well. We've got kids who've got GCSEs, who've gone on to A-levels, doing things from journalism to nursery nursing, graphic design. So it's a changing thing, and it really varies family to family. It's a changing situation. Some people make an assumption that perhaps travellers don't value education. They certainly do, and I'd say almost all the families I work with, they want the very best for their children's future. But their idea about how to get that might be different, and it might not be about formal education. Education can be a lot more than the classes that are done in school, and some of the traveller children know an enormous amount about things that they pick up from home life, whether that could be about family trades or scrap metal work or looking after animals. There's a lot of other skills that the community really does foster.
They're coming to move us, I heard my mum say. Come on, help your brother, there's no time to play. Pick up the dishes, the buckets, that pan. It's there by the fire, quick, here comes the man. We'll give you till 12, then be on your way. There's no need to argue, you can't really stay. Move on to the next town. I don't like it here. It's too close to the roadside and traffic, I fear. They're building new places. They're calling them sites. It's a big step to take, but Dad said we might. It all sounds so final, Mum starts to say. We'll all have to go on then, Dad says, someday. Travelling is finished and this life is through. We'll try that new site for a week, maybe 2. But 30 years later, those sights, they are many. Our people have changed now. I do not know any. I'm glad Dad can't see it, but who do we blame? That man who came knocking, but what was his name? There's so many changes, life's never the same.